Hi everyone, my name is Nick Scott and I'm the manager of the Forest City Youth Film Festival. Thank you for joining us today for the final spring seminar in our Youth Filmmaking 101 series. We're excited to bring you what will no doubt be an educational discussion on how to write and direct great characters. Before we begin, I'd like to encourage all student filmmakers watching today to submit to the 2021 Forest City Youth Film Festival. If you've created a video you think fits one of our 7 categories, we'd love to see it. Entering your films into the festival is free, and there are $5,000 in cash prizes to be won. Submissions close June 30th, and we'll provide more information at the end of our discussion. This seminar is live, so we encourage students, educators, and anyone else watching to ask questions throughout our presentation by using the chat. We will have time at the end of our discussion to post some of our questions to the guests, so keep them coming. I'd like to start by welcoming student filmmaker Sophie Siew to our seminar today. Sophie's short film, Eldritch, was the winner of the narrative category at the 2020 Forest City Youth Film Festival. She has recently completed her first year at Western University for Film and Media Studies. Let's take a look at a clip from her short film, Eldritch, from last year's Youth Festival.
Hey, it's Christian.
Listen, I don't know how you got Chris's phone, but this isn't funny.
What?
Is this some kind of prank or something? My brother died in a car accident 2 months ago. Jesus, I thought we canceled his phone number already.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for joining us today. That was some really great stuff. Lots of tension and everything there for us. How are you doing today? I'm good, thank you. Just wanted to ask, so you know, strategically in that clip, we kind of didn't reveal the ending of that, but I'm wondering if you could just fill our audience in on kind of what the reveal was there with your film.
Right, did you want me to spoil it?
What's that, sorry?
Did you want me to spoil it?
Yeah, just a little bit, I think, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I wanted to like create a kind of plot twist at the end. I think those kinds of plot devices are really cool, and that's really what I want to accomplish. At the end, we see a lot of like the whole point of the film is that we don't know the identity of this masked figure. In the end, it's revealed, and it becomes that's when I decided to let the audience in on the big reveal, you know, like what really happened and like who this character really is.
Great, and can you tell us who that character was when they kind of revealed at the end?
So it turned out to be him, like it's himself, and like there's a whole backstory about what happened to him and, you know, his sister, like the car accident and all that, and that's just what I try to accomplish at the end.
Yeah, that's great. It was really, really effective when we watched it. Can you tell me a little bit about how you kind of developed Eldritch a little?
For sure, yeah. I've always been inspired by kind of trippy, mind-bending, science fiction, and I watched a lot of horror movies growing up, so I really wanted to incorporate some of these thematic elements into my film. I thought it was really cool that the whole the first part of the film kind of is a horror film, but at the end we kind of get a more suspense and kind of a mystery element to it. That's what I kept in mind during the pre-production process.
Great, yeah, it was really effective, and I know that it was a really great ending that kind of leaves me wanting more. It was kind of, you know, it felt like there was another story to kind of tell after that, which was really great, really effective. So I think you did an excellent job of developing that.
Thank you. I wanted to cut at the end as well. I cut when you just give the audience enough information about the character, but not fully to give them a full satisfaction.
Yeah, no, it was really, really effective. That's great. So if anybody does want to see it, we do have on the Forest City Youth Film Festival YouTube channel, there's a video called The Watch Party where we kind of stream all of our winners from the last 2 youth film festivals, and Sophie's full film is available there for everybody. So that's great, Sophie. Thank you very much. Sophie, I'm just going to move on and I'm going to introduce our guest today. I'd like to introduce today's special guest, writer-director Jeremy Lalonde. Jeremy grew up in Cayuga, Ontario, and graduated from Niagara College for film production. He is an award-winning writer, director, and editor for both film and television, and has over 5 feature films to his credit. Jeremy is currently completing post-production on his latest feature film, Killing Daniel, starring Bob Saget and Jason Jones. Let's take a look at the trailer for his comedy James vs. His Future Self, which screened at the 2020 Forest City Film Festival.
Check out that sky tonight. Hey, you never know when you might have a conversation. It can change your life.
No, thank you. Excuse me, why are we stopped?
I just want to talk to you, James. James! Really? What's your plan, bud?
Ow.
Well, hello, sunshine. Welcome back.
What's happening?
I'm gonna keep it simple. 12 years from now, you figure out how to send me back in time. I am you from the future. I'm from the future! You're from the future! We not you, me, you. We are from the future!
Okay, that's good. You're taller than me.
Taller, fatter. Time travel really stretches you out a little bit each time.
I want you to tell me everything. How far back can we go, huh?
A month, a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. But you don't even appreciate the time you're in right now. Would you slow down on the croissant? Your ego, your self-righteousness, it's gonna smother all the other parts of your life. love, joy, family. So I came back to stop you from making that mistake.
What if I can change? I can fix it.
A tiny change today
brings a dramatically different tomorrow.
Oh, I forgot to mention, we can also teleport. I'm kidding, I snuck in the back.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for joining us today. There
Trying
it
to
is.
center up. There we go. Where am I?
Right there. There
Wrong
you go.
side?
Yeah.
There. Now
Yeah.
I'm in. Now I'm in.
Our team will adjust it a little bit for you too at some point, I think. But there you go.
Okay.
Yeah,
There we
that's
go.
great. Thanks for joining
Hey,
us today. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Just got to say, really enjoyed James versus his future self. I know that's kind of one of our touch points that we're going to be speaking about today, and kind of how you develop characters and that kind of things. But as far as a really great comedy with a lot of great emotional storylines through it and stuff, it really hit home. I thought it was really fantastic. So thanks very much for joining us and taking some time today to talk to us about that.
Oh, my pleasure.
Great. So, Jeremy, let's just kind of jump in. We are here to talk about writing and directing great characters, which you have a lot of experience in and stuff. So, I just wanted to jump into kind of our first question to get our conversation started, which was, I wonder if you could tell our audience what are the functions of characters in a film? Why are they so important for us?
Yeah. So I always start, and when I say always, like when I'm writing now, I do. I think throughout my career as a writer, I've started in different capacities. Sometimes it's just like I have a great idea, or like a hook for something. But more and more as I get older, what I realize is at some point it really just all comes down to theme for me, and what the movie's about at its core. And so I try to figure that out sooner rather than later. Because eventually down the line, I always have to, go back to that and then end up doing massive rewrites to accommodate once I figure out what it's really about. So I try to get to the heart of that a lot faster just to save myself some time. So coming up with just what I want to say with it. And so for an example of James versus his future self, which we just saw the trailer for, that's a movie that Jonas Chernick and I developed for a year or two before we really came up and figured out what the real core theme was, which was a movie, a time travel movie about being in the present, about what it means to, stop thinking about the future and stop thinking about the past and just appreciate the time that you're in and what you have and not what you want to have or what you did have. And so once we kind of figured that out, it just informed everything, and it made all of the writing clearer and cleaner. But also, what we needed to do and what I do as I'm writing is like, okay, well, that's my theme and that's what it's about. So what are the different capacities of that? And what are the different, and how do I want to talk about that theme? And that's how I build my cast design around it. So I know I have, at the heart of the story, the biggest story point is James, a man who is stuck in the present, who wants nothing more to travel through time to either the present or the past, the past or the future. But what he needs to learn is to appreciate the time he's in. So he's going to represent the theme the best. He's going to have the biggest arc that represents that theme. But then what you also need is characters that push different points of that conversation. You've got Jimmy, who is the older version of James, played by Daniel Stern, who is from the future and is the one who is just really trying to teach him that lesson and trying to show him what he needs to learn. And then you've got all these other characters. You've got, his boss, Dr. Rowley, who's played by Frances Conroy, who is very much on the other side of the spectrum, where she's like, no, you should only focus on the future. You should only focus on what you're going to do. So she represents that part of the theme, and then you've got the sister character who is so in the present and just so doesn't think about anything else. Like lives a little bit in the past with the backstory of their parents, but she represents just enjoying where you are and doing what you're doing. And then you've got Courtney, who is the love interest in the film, played by Cleopatra Coleman, who is kind of that perfect balance of having figured out how to do both, how to live a little bit in the future and think about where you want to go, but also really enjoy the place and time you are. She's able to compartmentalize those different things. So that's our 5 characters in the movie, more or less. There's a couple small speaking rules here and there, but for the most part, those are our 5 characters. And so each one of those exists for a very specific reason within the framework of the story. And they all have different points of view that are surrounding on the theme and whatnot. And so what happens when you do that and you go, okay, this character's function is this character's function of that, and you know that every single character has a different function in the script, has a different point of view in relation to the theme. What's great is when you drop those characters inside of any scene with each other, they automatically have opposing views on the theme. And so you automatically have conflict within any scene just by having them do anything. You know, they should have different points of view on everything. And if you find that you've created a scene where 2 characters have the same point of view, then you probably don't need one of those 2 characters in your script, or you can combine them, or you need to tweak it, right? So if you're finding that you can't generate conflict between characters, it's probably because you didn't design those characters in a strong enough way to just naturally be able to create conflict.
Okay.
And the same happened when I've done a bunch of other ensemble films. The film I just shot was a big family ensemble film too, which was about the idea of family and what does it mean to be a family, shared, blood family versus kind of adapted family. And each single character inside that had to have a different, thematic relevance.
When you're designing an overall cast, it sounds like you're building off of theme, which then kind of creates conflict. Is there anything else that you're kind of deciding between how those characters work in relation to one another and within that world?
Yeah, so I'll do little character bios for each character, and just in term. And when I say bios, it's not like they went to this school and their favorite breakfast is this. Like, I don't need or care about all that information unless it's inside of the story. I find a lot of that kind of stuff is just kind of useless writing until it gets informed by the story. That said, once you've created a character and fleshed it out, if someone were to ask me what does that character normally have for breakfast, I should be able to answer based on who the character is and that kind of stuff. But that's not what I mean by the bio. What I mean by is I start to write out about what are their wants, what are their hopes, their flaws, their needs. So it's like to create a really interesting character, in particular your lead character or characters, they need to have a very significant flaw. So again, back to the example of James versus his future self, this is a man who ignores the present, who is only focused on things other than where he is and where he is now. And so that's his big flaw in the movie. And his want is to become the world's first time traveler. So your character needs to have a flaw. So in that example, it's James's inability to live in the present. His want is to become a time traveler, but his need is to have to live in the present and appreciate where he is before he can go off and go somewhere else. And so you need all of those things to be playing throughout the movie. And it helps to kind of write, I like to try to write what I call a broken compass statement, which is the idea of, a character having a strong statement that kind of represents their flaw. So for James, it's that it's like, I will only focus on where I'm going. I will not focus on where I am, or focus where I've been. I will always focus on that. I do not need to focus on the present. And it helps to give a character, I'm co-opting a phrase, I think, from one of the Save the Cat books, but what those books would call the shard of glass, which is like something that happened to your character at some point in their backstory that created something that has kind of informed who they are and helped create this flaw. So for James, it's the fact that when he was younger, his parents died. And so part of his drive to want to go and be a time traveler is to see if he can't save them, is to figure out a way to travel through time so that he could eventually go back far enough to save them.
Okay. That's really good. So are there any other traits that you feel are really important for developing characters besides the wants and the needs? Do you really get down to the nitty-gritty with some of it, or is it more for the main characters and then you work around that outside of that?
I do it for all the characters. Any character that has a significant part in the script, like if someone's just in one scene as a very small character, then probably I don't go into that level of detail. But anything that would be like part of the leads or the supporting cast, I definitely do all of that work. And then it's also just really thinking about who are these people in relation to each other and making sure they all have a different kind of voice and a different point of view. That leads into the theme stuff too, right? Like that's point of view is, that's almost the same thing. And that way, just when you drop them all into a scene together, they automatically have different things to say and different opinions about anything. So, but then literally just like thinking, how does this person talk? And how do you write dialogue so characters sound different from one another? If your script is well written, you should be able to cross out and black out all the names in the script and read it and be able to figure out which character is which just by the way they speak, if it's written well. And so part of the trick is just listen to how other people talk. If you know someone who has like a certain way of phrasing things a certain way, pay attention to that, make notes on it, or like anyone. You can take inspiration from anywhere, anyone. And then the idea of it can sometimes help is when you go through the script, do a character pass for every single character in the script. Start at the beginning of the script and be like, I'm going to read it from this character's point of view, and just look at that dialogue and make sure all of that flows consistently and feels like it's in the same voice. I'm literally reading a script's friend right now, and it's a great script, but about halfway through, one of the supporting characters is like, I feel like their voice completely changed and they sound 20 years younger than they are. They started using totally different turns of phrases. And I'm like, are you aware that this character did a big swap? Is there a point to this? Because I missed it. So just little things like that, going through and just making sure your characters all sound different from one another. And when you cast, part of that too is casting, because if you cast well and you make sure you're casting like a diverse group of actors, and I mean diversity in all ways, like of course it's like gender and ethnicity and all those things and backgrounds of life, but also just diversity in terms of like people and who they are and kind of the energies they have. It's a trick because you got to make sure they all fit together within the general film and they all belong together. But also, what they're going to do if you cast like a really diverse group of people in a movie, anytime you write bad dialogue or dialogue that's a bit flat or that doesn't feel true to the character all the way through, they'll probably help fix that. Or they'll make it better. I'm also just not, I don't make people, I don't feel like actors have to say every single word I wrote beat for beat for beat or put the commas in all the same places I put them. I want them to make sure they get the gist of it. And every now and then I'll be very specific about how I want them to phrase something. If they're not making it better, I'll be like, actually, let's go back to the script. But 9 times out of 10, an actor will find a way to put those words in their mouth that feel more natural to them. And it's just going to make the writing feel so much stronger if you let actors do that. But then just the trick is making sure they're not stepping away from the meaning of what you originally intended, because there's some actors don't actually understand the script and they'll pretend they do. And so you've just got to make sure they're saying what actually needs to be said. And you have to make sure you understand why those words are being. Because if an actor asks you and you don't.
Okay, great. Sorry, we were just losing you just a tiny bit there, Jeremy. I just wanted to follow up with you about...
Oh, am I okay now?
Yeah, you're good now. It looks like, yeah, we can see you. We had a question from Hanisha who kind of asked about the inspiration for James in James versus His Future Self. But how much did, I know Jonas worked on that with you and you kind of developed himself together yourselves, but casting him in that role, and like how much inspiration were you pulling from other sources, or was it still kind of working mainly from theme and then building up from there? I wonder if you could speak to that for us.
Yeah, that's a script that took a couple different iterations. Originally, the idea behind the backstory is more about just James being a doormat and letting everyone walk all over him. And that was our first year of working on that script, Jonas and I. And originally we were developing it for Jonas to play the older version, to not play James, but to play the Jimmy type character. And later on, we, as the theme became more relevant and all of that, we realized that James should be a little bit older and we should cast, and Jonas should play that part and not the other part. And it kind of came down to, I was going through a lot of my own changes in my own life and just like trying to be more present and more mindful and whatnot. And there was this key moment that I stole from my lone life where I was sitting down with my family for dinner and I'm, was being a jerk and being on my phone. And my wife was giving me for it. And she's like, hey, can you put the phone down and just, be with us? And I was like, look, I'm sitting down here. It's dinner time. I'm here. And she said, if you're going to be here 100%. Just don't be somewhere else. And so the line, I took and reworded it, but it kind of became my mantra for the film and what I think is the main thematic statement that I put into the mouth of Daniel Stern's character, which is wherever you are, be all there. The idea is if you're going to do something, do it 100%. Don't be on a beach and sitting on your phone. Be on a beach and just sit there and enjoy the beach. Yeah. If you're hanging out with somebody, hang out with that person. If you're going to eat a meal, taste the flavors of the meal, enjoy it. Don't just be a casual passenger in your life. Sit there and actually do what you're doing. And so, that actually, when after that, it was such a revelation in my own life, but also, for that, I took that because it was really relevant to the movie we were working on. And I was like, oh, I think this is something I want to talk about and write about. And I pitched it to Jonas and he was like, yeah, I can relate to that. That's great. And that's the thing that I know, having traveled around the world with this movie and spoken to audiences, it's something that's really, really struck home with a lot of people, especially like as we released it and the world was going through, this pandemic and people freaking out about all these things we weren't sure, we didn't know, and we still are. There's so many uncertainties that it's like this idea of like, just focus on where you are and you can be probably a little bit happier than if you just start worrying about all the things you can't control.
Yeah, okay. And it felt like a very real moment in the film. And I thought it was something nice that you kind of built to that moment. It wasn't like kind of hit us over the head right off the top or anything like that. It felt very natural and really built in, which was really great. Just a reminder to our audience, you can feel free to ask some questions in our YouTube chat feature for Jeremy here and for Sophie as well. Jeremy, I just wanted to bring it back for our student audience and stuff who are making short films and they're entering short films in our festivals. And you have experience with short films. That's kind of where you got started and everything, but how many characters do you feel are kind of ideal in a short film? Like what's too many and is there too few, or how do you feel about that?
I don't think there's really a number. It really comes down to the story you're telling and what you need. I think anytime you don't need a character, it's too many characters. I think 2 characters can be too many depending on the story you're telling. Or it really comes down to if every character has a function, then there is no wrong amount of characters. For a short, probably you want to keep it as limited as possible, just because working with that many people and all that kind of stuff can just get complicated. But as long as every character serves a function, there's no real rhyme or reason why you can't have as many as you think you need. I think, in general, people just over bloat things and they just need to pare it all back. I know that in my own writing, that's always when I do my vomit draft of my script, I find it's always 20% too long and people talk too much and all those kind of things. So just paring it back to the essentials and holding yourself to task helps a lot. Making sure that as long as a character has a goal or an intention in the scene and an obstacle, that's all you need, and if you don't have one of those things, then you probably don't have a scene anyway, because that's how you generate conflict, right? Every scene has to have a character with an intention or a goal and something stopping them from getting that goal.
Okay, great. That makes sense. I think Sophie was just kind of going to jump on, and she just wanted to pose a couple questions for you.
So the first thing I wanted to ask was I think for me, I really enjoyed the writing in the film. And I know the writing process can be something like you talked about. It can be something that's really fluid and over time as things change in your life and things change in the film. In the pre-production process, the writing can evolve, right? I was curious as to how do you tweak your characters to fit a particular actor? Are there some methodologies that you or traits you have in mind when you wrote James or Jimmy, to make that adapt to the actor himself?
Yeah, it happens at different stages. For the example of James versus Future Self, we knew we were writing James for Jonas. And Jonas was writing with me. And I've worked with Jonas before as an actor, so we had a pretty strong sense of what his strengths are. You want to kind of write to an actor's strengths at some point, or the character's strengths. And so in terms of writing Jimmy, who was played by Daniel Stern, we were just trying to write a really dynamic, strong role that had a lot of meat on it. And then eventually when we cast Danny, we just talked about it a lot and did some tweaks for him, but by the time we got the script to him, it was in pretty strong shape, and then it was just really going through it with him scene by scene. And kind of the thing that he did with us was going through it and just saying, I think you've got 4 sentences here and you need one of them, or 2 of them, and just really, really paring it down to what are the essentials of this? Why am I saying all these things? And I think it's just one of those things where it's when you cast an actor too, I always do, as soon as I cast a film, I always do another pass on the script based on who I've cast, if I need to tweak it at all, shift it at all. If they have any notes or thoughts that want to be incorporated, I always like to let actors give their thoughts on the script and if their characters can be tweaked or improved in any capacity. So it's just really being fluid and being collaborative with the actors and being open to constructive criticism and just, the biggest trick you have to get used to as a writer is to separate yourself from the script and know that you're not the same thing. So just don't take anything personal. If someone bumps against something, they're not giving you a note to upset you. They're giving you a note because something bumped them, or something pulled them out. So I think it's just being, just knowing that it's someone commenting on the script or critiquing it is not a critique or a comment on you.
Great, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. Sophie, I think you had a follow-up question as well.
Yeah. So I was really interested in the character design of your film. First, I was actually curious how you create a compelling protagonist, one that is obviously flawed, like you mentioned, but also likable. And we root for them. I think that's it's really challenging sometimes to create a protagonist that's both likable but not superhuman, as in they're perfect, no flaws, a perfect character, a perfect hero. And part 2 to that question is how, when you create those characters, then how do you transport that into establishing chemistry and inter-character relationships? How do you build authentic chemistry between these characters?
Yeah. So there's a couple questions in there. Let me go through them one at a time. So, in terms of creating a dynamic character that has, you want to root for and has flaws. And I think this goes whether it's, a hero or a villain or a sidekick type character. It comes down to, all characters are flawed. All human beings are flawed. We're all flawed. And so what are those flaws? How do they translate to the theme of the story? And usually your flaw is, something you're going to work towards your ending, towards fixing. I think the real trick is that, and what makes you get behind these characters is that you have to believe in their flaws. You have to understand why they have those flaws and why it makes sense to them. It's similar to how like the best villains in any movie, aren't the villains in their minds. In a different version of that story, they're the hero and they believe what they're doing is correct. So it's easier to get behind a character who believes in themselves. It isn't just like a mustache twirling villain or evil for the sake of being evil. Like they've got a real agenda, and you could argue their point and be like, where they're coming from makes sense. Their approach is wrong. And I think that's the trick too, is like characters, there's something really likable of people that just try and people go for things and just make attempts, right? To create drama and comedy and whatnot, you want them to make bad choices. You want them to make choices that they shouldn't make, but that they earnestly believe in for a reason that we can buy into, but it also doesn't hurt to go to make a list of like, what are the reasons we can root for this character? For James, for example, just off the top of my head, it's like, he is an orphan in a way. And, his parents died when he was young. He had no choice but he kind of gave up his dreams a little bit to stay with his sister and help take care of her, even though they don't have a great relationship. He did do that. He works really, really hard. He believes in what he's doing. He has this, need inside of him to try to reconnect with his parents. And he's kind of like this he's a bit of a sad puppy who you just kind of want to protect and help. So it's like those kind of things I think make a character endearing. And then so you're allowed to give him flaws where he just does and says things because you buy into it too, because he's naive and he's not saying it because he's deep down a jerk. It's just like he doesn't know any better, So just trying to create those kind of things and really it helps to, and this is just a good mental exercise for people in life and this is part of being a director anyway, is psychology and the idea of going, anytime you're faced with somebody that bumps you the wrong way or pisses you off, take a moment to really put yourselves in their shoes and goes, why are they acting that way? What's causing them to do that? Because I earnestly believe that nobody deep down is just a crappy person and wants to be mean or rude. It's like it's coming from somewhere. It's often deep insecurity, So it's like trying to figure out what that is and why someone's acting a certain way will unlock so much for you, and it'll give you ideas for characters like, oh, I can use that, So just make a list of all the people that you don't like in your life and just try to think about their lives from their point of views and why they act a certain way, and it'll really make you a stronger writer and also director too, because you're going to have moments where you're on set as the director and not understanding why someone's upset about something or someone's bumping against something. And so your job is to be a detective and figure out what that is. And then in terms of your character about creating chemistry, I mean, that's kind of thing. There's a difference between chemistry on the page and chemistry on the set. Those are two very different things. Chemistry on the page just comes down to your skill as a writer and making characters, have some kind of rapport with each other. But in terms of casting, it's about taking the time to get to know the characters and the actors as much as you can, but then just having them relate to each other in a way that makes sense as well. And if you're casting two people who are playing a couple who've been together for a significant amount of time, you might want to see if they'll spend some time together and find some ways to connect with each other and find little things. For example, in James versus his future self, with James and Jimmy, we're having two actors that are, 25, 30 years apart in age playing the same character. And so what, and they've got to, and it was interesting when we were doing rehearsals for that, and in prep, we kept on watching all these old Daniel Stern movies, and Jonas was making notes meticulously in his notebook about, oh, Danny, like, does this with his R's, and he kind of moves like this. And he was getting ready to do a Daniel Stern impression. And one night, I was just kind of laughing in the background. He was like, what? And I took his notebook and I threw it in the garbage. And I said, I'm glad you did all that work. I'm glad you watched all these movies. Now throw it all away. Because the whole point is that Jimmy is a different person now. He's gone on and has figured some out that you don't know yet. So you shouldn't be the same person. What we want to do is find little things of the audience, little clues that show that you guys are similar. So it's more in the ways that Jimmy gets awkward sometimes and uncomfortable. It's more about Danny doing stuff to echo who you are now, to show that he's still you. The way you guys stand, the way you guys lean, and just little things we'll do to mirror each other that we don't need to hang a lantern on or point a flashlight at with the audience, but they'll just kind of inherently pick up. And that was my job as a director. It wasn't necessarily something we put on the page, but it's something we worked out together. We worked out little facial tics and weird little ways they walk, and just little things that I don't know if you could necessarily point to them when you're watching the movie for the first time, but I think it's the kind of thing you subconsciously pick up. The way I'd often frame them facing each other, and sharing frames in certain ways. They were always meant to mirror each other in a lot of scenes.
That's really great, Jeremy, because that was something that, going into your film was a little worried about. And even at first, it was kind of like, wow, I don't know. They don't seem very similar at all at first, but then you really hit upon, and throughout that, when you see that in the development, that they're not the same person. He has changed, he's learned different things and everything, so it's not going to be the same person. So I think that's a really important insight that kind of really made the film work, which was excellent. So we just have a question from Tyler, and I wanted to kind of segue off of what you were talking about, where you were saying how you listen to people and their dialogue and what they're saying, and you write things down. But Tyler's question was, how do you come up with your ideas for your movies and some things like that? So are you often borrowing from friends around you and family and stuff, or are you looking for do just original ideas pop out of things you see?
No one idea. Every idea has come from somewhere different. It's there's no one place I get ideas from. It's generally life, or just a question will pop into my head that I want to figure out the answer to. I don't want to go into details. I'm developing a musical right now, and that all started from like we were playing, without going into details of it, my kids and I were playing one of those would you rather games, and one of the questions that came up just made me start to really dive into it and think about it way too much, to the point where 2 years later I'm developing a musical. I have songwriters, and it's just like it's turned into a whole big thing. That's very exciting, but it started as like me playing a would you rather game with my kids, and then I think really it comes down to like little things like that will come in, I think it's like right now I'm developing a lot of TV stuff, and for that I'm looking at like what kind of worlds am I interested in, and what haven't I seen yet on television. And playing within that. Television and films are two different things, because it's just one's like a story that never ends, and the other one is meant to be more of a finite thing. But I think it's just going, what's something I can sink my teeth into, and then I think especially with films, it's really about what's a question I want to dive into, I want to answer. For James, it was just this idea Jonas and I had of, what if someone from the future came and told you that your life was going to be an utter garbage fest, and they knew that because they were you, and that you were going to destroy your life. What would that do to a person? And so it started with that kind of question, and then it took us down a bunch of different pathways, so we finally found the one that worked. But that was kind of the first question that popped into our heads with that. I think Aaron Sorkin describes it as, is this a pitch I should swing at? He uses a lot of sports metaphors. And so the idea being like you're standing at the plate and someone throws a pitch at you and it's like, is this something you can hit? Is this an idea you can take and run with based on, who you are as a writer and the way you see the world? And I also think that's a big thing for me too. I'm like, if an idea comes to me, I try to be able to separate. I'm like, oh, is that a great idea that I like and I'd want to see? Or is that something that I could take and run with and make better? Because of the way I see the world and my point of view and the stories I want to tell.
Great. That's great. We just have a question from Reagan. Just want to get back a little bit, Jeremy, to just casting. And they had asked, how long does it take to cast the right actors? And what happens if you start filming with somebody and you kind of discover or find you think they might not be great for the role? I'm not sure if you've encountered that or anything, but...
If you're in Hollywood, and you have money, you can maybe recast and reshoot. If you're working in like the independent sector, you've just got to really hope you cast properly. I have had those instances though where you're like, oh shoot, this is your approach to this character is much different than I anticipated. Casting is a complicated beast. I've been really lucky in that, I made this little kind of side secret film back in the fall where we cast it in amongst, great Canadian actors that I know. And literally it was one phone call to each of those 6 actors and I had my cast. They came together like that. The film I just finished shooting took 4 years to cast. So it's there's your answer. Like one film I made back to, and those are two films I made back to back. The first film took me a week to cast, and the second film took me 4 years. So there is every single movie has such a weird history in how fast or long it takes to come together. And it depends on so many different elements, The movie I made in the fall was something that we were making for, $150,000. So we didn't have a lot of pressure on us to deliver, big famous actors. And so we could just cast great actors. And we got great actors. One of our actors is like one of the leads on Handmaid's Tale. And just some other great Canadian actors. But then for the other film, it was all independently financed with a much bigger budget. And so the casting was really important to our salespeople. And so that took a lot longer. So I think it really comes down to that. If you need actors that have name value to sell your movie, casting will always take longer. And then in terms of just, working with actors who may not be right for the role is like, just get good at it. Watch when you cast someone or are thinking of casting someone, watch as much of them as you can if you can see other work of theirs. If they're a newer actor, I think the trick is when you're auditioning an actor, is to really give them a workout in the audition room. If they come in and they nail the first take, that's great. If they do the scene exactly the way you had in your head, amazing. Don't stop. Now make them do it the opposite way. Throw something that's probably wrong, and you can even say, this is probably wrong, but I want to see what you would do with this. Give the actor and yourself a workout and see what they're capable of. Because any actor can come back in and redo exactly what they did in the audition, but you don't want to find out on set that this actor can't actually roll with the punches and play. When you get later on in your career and you're working with bigger actors, you're probably just going to have to offer them roles without them auditioning. And so in that case, you want to watch as much of them as possible to see what their range is as an actor. But if you're lucky enough to audition an actor, it's your job to see what their range is and to see where you can get them. So that way when you get on set and you need them to make tweaks and changes, what they're capable of or what their weaknesses are.
Yeah, that's really great. That makes sense. That's kind of like, and I mean, in sports as well, you're going to be training for all different aspects of the game, for anything. So it's good to know that your cast and the people that you've hired to work with are kind of flexible and able to do that as well, for sure. Sophie, I think, had a question for you as well.
Yeah, in terms of like student short films, I think it's a different volume altogether. So how do you direct, like, if you're casting a friend, like for example, I've used my friends many times. Most of my films are like just like good friends of mine who are willing to do something, and often they're amateurs or like they're not really comfortable on set because like they've never been acting.
Yeah.
Like, how do you like guide them to create like an authentic character, or just make them feel more comfortable and like get them attuned to the characters that you've written out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trick is just, and this goes whether you're working with an amateur actor or a professional actor, is figure out what range they're comfortable within, and work within that and play towards those strengths. You know, if you're working with an unprofessional actor who has never acted before, don't make them pretend to be something they're not. You're going to get an inauthentic performance because they don't know how to tap into that. They don't know how to create a character. So you're setting yourself up for failure if you're expecting your friend Bob to like pretend to be like a Wall Street lawyer. You know, they're just not going to be authentic. You know, when you're working with unknown, you know, amateur actors, cast them as themselves and just expect them to do what they do. And if you get anything outside of that, that's gravy. But if you expect anything more than that from an unprofessional actor, you're setting yourself up for heartbreak. You know, and spend time with them, get to know their strengths or weaknesses, and just make them feel relaxed and comfortable, and let them know. And I think the trick is too, and again, this works with what's pros or amateurs. It's like your job as a director is to make people at ease and comfortable, and to know that you're not there to get something perfect. You're there to play, to experiment, and to figure some stuff out. You know, I had a situation with two actors on a movie years ago where one actor said to me that, like, because the one actor would always do something totally different every time in a take, and the other actor was just trying to build to like the same thing. And the one actor came to me, he was getting frustrated. It's like, I can't do this. They're doing something different every single time, and I'm just trying to get it right. And I said, I think the mistake is you're trying to get it right. There is no right. There's nothing, one specific thing we're trying to do here. We're here to discover and to find stuff. I said, so what you need to do is match that. Stop doing what you're trying to do and doing it right. React to what they're doing and just feed off of them. And don't worry about all this other, what you built inside of your head on how to do it. Just be present with that other actor and bounce off of them. And the moment they did that, those two characters came alive in a way that they hadn't in the first day or two of shooting. And after that scene, that actor came to me and was like, that was the best direction he'd ever gotten, especially from me, where just react to the other actor. Don't get out of your own head of what you think the scene needs to be, and just be in the scene.
Oh, that's really great. That's great advice. Jeremy, we just have a couple more minutes. Just quickly, we have a question from Miss Midwood who wants to ask you about how you get over writer's block.
Just keep writing. You know, I don't believe in writer's block. I believe that it's like, I do a lot of outlining. I spend, I think there's so many, I think people think of like, writing is only writing if you're writing scenes and dialogue and that kind of stuff, where it's just like outlining, doing character bios, writing down lists of character flaws, lists of different wants and needs. All that is writing. So, you know, if a scene's not coming to you, work on something else. Work on a different aspect of it. You know, you don't do more work. I find like if you get into the point of writer's block where you can't come up with a scene, it's because you haven't done enough work somewhere else in the script or in the outlining process. So work on that. You know, there's always something you can work through or to do. You know, think of it like, the way you work out your body. You know, you can't do upper body exercise every single day because your muscles are going to be tired the next day. They need time to recuperate. So it's like, if you're just trying to work on this aspect of your script every single day, eventually you're going to come to a point where it's like, your script is just like, no, I need a break from that. So now you can focus on something else for a bit and strengthen that part, right? And that's how you get a fullier strengthened body. You know, you do upper body one day and lower body another day and core another day. You know, that's a weird metaphor, but think of it that way. It's just like to not like put too much pressure on yourself to focus on any one specific thing. Anytime you're moving the ball forward in any capacity, whether it's like going back and strengthening your characters, any of that, just, you know, it's a form of writing.
Of course, yeah, that makes total sense. It's also it's also good to just kind of sometimes step away from it a little bit and just to think about something else. Or sometimes I often find too ideas and I can work through something when I'm doing laundry, for instance, or something like that. So
go for a walk. Go for a walk. do something different. Yeah, you might just need a break too. But I think if it's coming for days at a time, just focus on something else. Start writing something new. Take a break from it, walk away from it.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Well, that's definitely all the time I think we have today for our discussion. I want to thank both of our guests. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Sophie, for being here and sharing all your thoughts and your knowledge. Jeremy, we're really excited to see the upcoming films. And Sophie, I'm really looking forward to seeing your work. I know that you plan to do some shoots over the summer, so I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for the spring seminar of the Youth Filmmaking 101 series. We hope that you learn a lot, and thank you very much for your questions and your engagement. I just want to encourage, again, all student filmmakers out there to submit to the 2021 Forest City Youth Film Festival. Submissions are open until June 30th. We're going to have some information here after we sign off, and just visit our website and check out our categories. And submissions are free, and there's cash prizes to be won and everything. And we're really looking forward to seeing what everybody can create. Thanks again for joining us.